So we are now on the air.
Yay!
So who are we? Should we announce who we are?
Natanya can go first. She's labeled.
I can go first. Hi, everybody. I'm Natanya. I am one of the writers at Glittersquid.com. We are starting today with a recap of the first episode of Season 2 of Outlander because this has rather surprisingly infiltrated our ranks and our conversations and led to some crazy knitting projects and some genealogy research in my personal case. But I think we've all had some exposure to the books at some point or another, and we thought we would take an opportunity to kind of kick off the new season on Showtime and talk a little bit about our favorite English woman and her husbands and the goings-on. So, with me I have the lovely...
Hi, I'm Marzia Karsh.
And I'm Andrea Stoltz.
So
where to begin? Where to begin?
I'm coming off of like a total like bender because I really have been like watching Outlander at every possible second I can over the last week. So I just finished the first episode like mid-morning this morning. So I'm kind of like all rolling around in my head.
And I have to say, I didn't watch. I watched the first episode of last season, when it was available for free streaming, and then I didn't watch any other episodes. It didn't interest me enough to I have to see this whole series until they had the free trial, and then I watched the second episode, and then I just kept going all weekend, and that was like, okay, well now I have to have stars.
Yeah. I have to admit, I watched the first episode like you, and I kind of thought, oh, this is just going to be lady porn. Okay, it's good lady porn, but
very good lady porn.
Right.
I totally did not see it for the magnificent examination of life and love and recovery from trauma that it is.
And feminism, like crazy feminism.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which is weird because I read the books about 10 years ago and I got through to the Breath of Snow and Ashes, is that the one? And most of it has been erased from my brain since then. So I kind of remember basics about it, but I think we were talking about this earlier, the casting is really fascinating because I think most of us agreed that Katrina Balfe has completely supplanted Claire for us.
Absolutely.
She is what we were saying, like the Mr. Darcy or Colin Firth to Mr. Darcy. She is this character. I think that casting for me just immediately, I was like reaching into my brain and like pulling it out, and I just kind of like followed along, sort of slack-jawed the whole time.
I can't imagine anyone else doing this part now. I mean, she's beautiful, but she's also she comes across very much as intelligent, resourceful, proud. She totally embodies
really competent.
Yes, and with all its with all of the fallibility that comes from being confident too.
Yeah.
She puts herself out there. She's a great character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think she's kind of like a proto-geek in a way. I mean, she's like totally obsessed with flowers and plants and like categorizing them and finding out if they have medicinal properties and using science to try to, work on top of that. And I think that's so compelling that the entire reason she's whisked off is because she's like, those flowers, I've got to go back.
Right.
For my press book, so I've never seen them before. I think I know maybe they're forget-me-nots. I can't remember. And that fact that her personal learning journey is what's pulling the narrative versus she doesn't start off from a place like, oh, I'm miserable in my marriage. I mean, it's not a perfect marriage, but she's not trying to run away from anything. I think that's what is super compelling and what certainly comes back to in this first episode of season 2, where you kind of feel bad for Frank when he's like, I don't care what happened. I just had to prove that you didn't do it on purpose. I don't care if you went through these magic stones and ended up in 18th century Scotland, as long as you didn't do it on purpose.
Well, I really, and I'm sure that this is the way it's designed, but I'm having a hard time being patient with him. And I keep going back in my head and going, he didn't do anything wrong. But
No.
I'm so team Jamie right now. And I guess that's intentional, that they want you to have that, that push and pull. But he actually really is, he's being a good, understanding partner for her. And so, like, I shouldn't be so, I guess that's part of the writing too, is the fact that you carried on along emotionally, and you're feeling her struggle now
Right.
that she's back in contemporary times, 1940s, that she's still mentally back in 200 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a great job with that, because but Jack Black is such a bad character.
Right, exactly. So you have the performance. I think that Tobias Menzies, I think is how you say his name, but he does such what an amazing performance, right? To go from one character to another.
Right.
And you get that feeling as the viewer that Claire's getting, is the last time she saw this guy, he was trying to rape her. Well, to rape her husband. Before that,
just
he was trying to rape her.
Spiritually destroy her and the person she loves. Like, could not be more evil.
And then there's the shades of Jack that you see, like when he gets angry, and you could see him like pull up his fist and almost punch her.
Which I don't think was in the books, but I could be wrong. I don't think there was.
Wait, I think the book started in 1968 and glossed over all of this. Never.
Yeah, I just started reading.
Went over it.
Book, but even in the sections that Frank is in the first book, there's really no indication he's anything but a good, educated, sometimes a little self-focused kind of guy. But you don't get this sort of. And I think they need to do that for TV. And I certainly see the Ron Moore influence on the male characters. And I think that you kind of need that. Listening to his sort of after episode talking, it is a very female forward book, but I think that he's helped kind of bring a little bit to some of the male characters a little bit.
Yeah, and I have to say I like most of the changes that they did for TV, and adding that bit in. I think it feels more satisfying to do that instead of introducing Frank as a ghost, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be interesting, not to give any spoilers for those of us who've read it, but how they do plot out the rest of the season, because I'm just very curious how they're gonna deal with certain things. But for now, the French trip is cool, right?
Yeah, I haven't read the books, so this is all new to me. I think I was birthing babies when everybody I knew was reading them.
First one came out in '91, so I shouldn't have been reading them at that age. I mean, it's a few years after I started reading Stephen King, but still. No, I read them when I was pregnant with my son, which then led me to realize that it was 10 years ago, which was just like, bleh. I will say though, for a first episode, I was a little disappointed, and I think part of it is I just had come off of seeing the season finale, literally like one after another, and it's pretty. I mean, there's some really good moments, but it's much more disjointed because you have this sort of almost triple narrative going on.
Right.
And although I like the fake outs when they like zoom out and she's in a plane, because like at first you're like, oh wait, is she going to be somewhere else? And they're like, oh no, she's still in a plane. She's flying to Boston. She's not.
And then here's the hand, and now she's back.
Yeah. And the relationship between Claire and Jamie seemed, I think, appropriately strained, but maybe not as much as I think I thought it might be. I mean, I thought the season finale was incredible. I do just wish, and this is that I was alluding to earlier, I didn't like it in the books, and I didn't like it in the show, that like Jack is clearly a suppressed homosexual.
Right.
Like, I feel like it's an old trope. I think it could have been fine if that wasn't his problem, but the fact that he's like impotent with Jenny and he can't get it up for girls, I kind of wish that it was maybe part of his power that he was doing, but it was kind of like, well.
Well, I think it's he's impotent without humiliation, without that portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
That he's got to be, humiliating and beating somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's because he couldn't get it up when Jenny laughed at him.
Right, I guess that's true.
I think that's exactly it. I hear what you say with that, but 200 years before, that would have been a career killer.
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Well,
40 years ago, 30 years ago, it would have been a career killer. Some
well,
places it's still a career killer.
they imply that the Duke of Savignon would uh,
Sandringham.
Sa-
Sandringham.
Sandringham, yeah,
Yep.
that he's also gay,
Yes. And
but he's not a sadist,
Oh,
and
see,
he's
I
never
kind of
taking
thought
anybody
he
against his
was.
will.
but
I thought
everybody
he was
wants
more
to,
just like, I'll
yeah.
have sex with anybody. Like I'm
That
the
could
equal
be.
opportunity.
Well, they're in France now, so I mean, it's going to be,
Right.
but I don't know. I was a little disappointed when it seemed, and it was a little bit less so in the show, I think, than in the books. But I remember I just sort of felt like it would have been cool to have some more positive sides to that, if possible. But I think you're right. I think a lot of that comes from just a power struggle and a desire to hurt and break something that he can't break. I mean, I think there was a lot more of that I felt in the show, that clarity of like, yeah, she totally has the hots for Jamie, but he wanted to like that first dialogue or monologue he has about that it was a creation of art that he saw in this flogging, that he was a part of something artistic, and he sort of taps into this incredibly sadistic, uh, almost like well of creativity, which is really screwed up.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was.
Right.
I think that's what the relation comes into. It's almost like a Pygmalion kind of thing. I think he felt like he was creating and breaking this work of art and making it into something else. And it was a person, um, a very handsome person.
So what does he get out of that? What does he get out of? I mean, clearly that was it. Like, does that redeem him in some way? Like, I want to follow that idea because to me it just seemed a little bit macabre for macabre's sake. Like,
Mhm.
would someone really? I don't know. Maybe I just don't have enough experience with sadists. Um,
And part of me was kind of thinking about it in terms of story structure, and that you have a show from a book. People jokingly call it a bodice ripper, but I think it's part of it's multi-genre, right? It has some aspects of overt sexuality and some that are not.
Hmm.
But to have the two main male characters who obviously have the baggage of Blackjack and Frank being sort of the same person, that they have this sort of crazy, destructive relationship that's some of the most violent TV I've ever seen. I mean, some of the
yeah.
hardest TV we talked about in Game of Thrones, like the Theon episodes, being hard. This was up there, if not worse. And it was worse because I think in Game of Thrones, it's just a really crazy guy. There seemed to be this undertone of almost gentleness and almost love that is so messed up
Hmm.
that, I mean, you kind of wince as you're watching it, and like, but you keep watching it. It's different because I think, also Theon is like a tertiary character. This is like your main characters. Really brutal. And the finger setting, oh my God, the finger bone setting in this. This is not TV for the weak stomach.
I appreciate that if they were going to write a rape scene into it, that it's the man who endures the rape and deals with the repercussions of it. I mean, at least at first, I'm
Yeah.
sure that there are going to be other scenes in other books, not that I've read ahead. But that's that actually that brings it to a different level, because then men can go, oh my God, that's horrible, without having it just be
Right.
gratuitous, like it
Right.
so often is.
Well, I had mailed you guys the one quote that I saw in the New Yorker talking about how this was an interesting flip. The author that was writing about I can't remember her name now, but she said something like, this story really explores female strength and male vulnerability, and that doesn't mean that the man isn't also strong and the woman isn't also vulnerable, but it's nice to see that interplay between the two of them, that they both get to experience, all of that, the full emotional spectrum. And
Mhm.
I think it really lends itself to making their relationship feel credible, that you get to see the vulnerability on his part. And and trying to recover from that. Like this is, like I said, when I first started watching this, I thought, oh, it's fun. These are very pretty people to look at, but I really did not see it for what it was. I didn't think it was going to be as full an exploration of their relationship. And it's not a happily ever after. It's like what happens after happily ever after when things fall apart. And they keep falling apart. Like, and you keep on having to rebuild after.
So you have your Scottish Highlander. Now what? He's gonna whoop you across the ass if you smart ass him. Yeah. And I thought one of the really interesting interchanges toward the end of the season finale, when he says, like, how can I go? I can't do anything. I was raped, and she's like, yeah, and
Yeah, I was raped like 6 episodes back.
Yeah, and then almost raped again, and then constantly threatened to get raped. So it was. I thought that was an interesting kind of like step back to like show that this can also. It's not something that is talked about in terms of the stronger sex, and it was sort of fascinating to see that she was just like, that's not enough for you to like go comatose and ignore me.
Right.
And not want to touch me, because I went through that and I got through it perfectly fine. It took a while, but we got there. So, and that's sort of the more masculine side of that, is that wasn't that so badly as the branding. When he finally gets down to talk about this, he broke him down so much that he made him harm himself. That is like the ultimate, like robbing of male power, right? Men are the opposite of agency, and you did that to yourself. That's pretty. Oh, looks like we lost Marzia. Well, we can keep talking.
Well, that had like a real Game of Thrones tone to it. That was very Theon-esque, and I have to admit, I don't need to go there that often. But there is a full exploration of emotions in this, and so I guess that's part of it. You are getting, like I said, it's not just happily ever after.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's part of what makes me like it so much, is that it really it's a fantasy, and yet that has this emotional feeling of being realistic, because you're getting a full sweep of emotions. You're getting a full the full experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if Marzia will come back.
I see her kind of.
Okay.
I was going to say too, I kind of, you do have this doubling concept, and having gone through graduate school, people always talk about doubling and dichotomies, like the favorite words of everybody. But I was thinking a lot this current episode about who's the better man, like who's the better husband. Is it Frank or is it Jamie? And I think when you really look at the facts, that Frank is taking her back. And not only that, he finally comes to the point where he's like, okay, I'm on board with you, whatever. And she's like, and I'm pregnant. And he formulates a plan. And honestly, his requirements aren't that crazy. I mean, if you think about it, she believes that Jamie's dead, and that's over. But she could just go on with her life and be like, peace out, Frank. I'm gonna go do this on my own. I thought that moment was so beautifully done, and when he talks about it later, I love that they actually reflected on that, because the performance was so profound to me. When you see that moment that he thinks he might have fathered a child.
Yeah.
And then it's like he's like punched, and he has to go, and he breaks everything. But when he talks to Reverend Wakefield about it, he talks about how he believed the fantasy for just a moment. And he said it was, and this is something she writes about in the books too, certain characters have these almost hallucinatory moments of seeing their lives in the future, or seeing images of things. And he talks about that, like it was like almost like hallucination. Ooh, we're getting some feedback.
Sorry about that, guys.
Woo.
Oh, there it is. Okay. I was figuring out the right time. Okay. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say,
my phone died, and that's why I was gone. And
now you're back.
So I could see you. I just couldn't talk.
I have to say there's a moment in the first season where they're in the woods and I'm trying to remember what I binged so much. I'm trying to remember what, I guess it was when they got back from escaping from Captain Jack. But he's so upset with her, and she's calling him an effing sadist, and she.
Oh, I love that scene.
and then he just looks at her and he says, "Forgiven."
Yeah.
And that was when I officially fell in love with this show, because to me that was like what a relationship is like. Like, you're with someone and you can be so furious, but the fact that he pauses a second and he goes, "No, I'm in this marriage. I want to be with this person, so I forgive you." To me, that was an incredible piece of writing. It's so what we should all aspire to, even with the screaming.
No, I loved that argument to pieces. I really did.
I love the foreshadowing too. That she called him a fucking sadist.
Yeah.
He had no idea what fucking meant. and then later on I caught it when what's her name says, "Well, I'm going to a fucking barbecue." And I was like, "Wait a minute, nobody would say that."
Yeah, let's dunk it.
Ding ding ding.
Yeah. That was pretty intense. Yeah, I think there's something about the way that each husband loves her is very different, because in the interactions you see with Frank, he admires her, but she doesn't permeate his world, right? In the first episode, you kind of see her constantly on the fringes, doing her own thing. They kind of have this parallel life. They love each other, and they come together.
Okay.
She talks about, when we make love, that's when we connect, but they kind of just go back to their parallel lives. You get the sense with Jamie and Claire, and I'll say as soon as she jumps up on that horse with him, you're just like, that's it, it's over, because he sees her in a constant way, in this completely Celtic knotted way. They are intertwined in a way that I don't think that the other two are, and I think that's what we strive for. But he's the kind of man that will also, he knows he has a lot to learn. Somehow he's not just a total brute.
Right.
When he makes a mistake, like when he whooped her ass, he was like, I shouldn't have done that. That was the wrong call.
Well, I'm not as firmly. I mean, what I like is that I'm feeling this tension right now, because they're different, but they're both very good partners for her.
Yeah, totally.
And so I like the fact that I'm torn between, between hoping that she's with one or the other of them, and that and puzzling through, like I said, because now there's this established bias with, there's no Jamie in the future that's as horrible as Frank is in the past. So, like, to me, I started to think, is this an unfair bias that's making me root more for Team Jamie? And so, like, there's a lot of thinking going on, and looking at, I like that about watching the show.
I loved the parallel weddings too, and I think that in our culture, weddings are so long planned and generally very super high frills and super expensive. And in both cases, it's not like she never had the wedding she wanted.
Right. Whatever reality she's in, she's getting hitched immediately.
Right. But I loved that there was this sense of surprise and numbness in both of them. She kind of ends up going through these motions, one to save her life. And it's funny because Michael's been sort of half watching as I've been watching, because I'm sort of like, I thought it was going to be a lot mushier, and I didn't think he would like it. And now I'm like, he totally would like it. But when he was like, well, they didn't have to consummate, I was like, yeah, they kind of did. I mean,
they had to, right? That's what he said.
She's like, well, they could have faked it. I was like, if I was in that room, I don't think I would have faked it. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, come on, there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief there, but yeah. Um,
So is because and I started out not watching it with my husband, and now that like we're into the second season, I'm like, oh, I should have had him watching this.
yeah, I totally agree. I'm like, how are you going to catch up? You're like
Right.
those behind. And I can't tell you to go read the books because they're even longer, but I did download Dragonfly and Amber this afternoon, so I was just like, I need to remind myself of what happens. I can't just sit here and wait for a week, see what they're going to do on the show.
How about Marcia? Are you watching with your husband, or is it just you?
I'm watching some of the episodes with him. So he like goes back and forth. And he's like, oh, just summarize it for me on some of them. But you know, he will watch it with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think with him, it's strangely that he gets too emotionally attached to shows. It really is. I mean, he loves costume dramas. Go figure. But he, you know, I think he's just like he's afraid that he's gonna like you know. And then he saw like the last two episodes of last season. And he's like, I don't know. I can't. I am done. You know?
I feel him.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking, I mean, the costumes, it was so cool this last episode to get back into that doubling of the costumes of across the eras, you know, 200 years apart. I was totally, it felt, especially when the car comes up behind her and you realize she's walking on a paved street. And in my head, I was watching, I was like, what must that sound like to your ears if you haven't heard a car? And having been to Scotland, there are plenty of swaths of land even now that you can be on. There ain't nobody for a long time. But I thought it was really, and that guy, I swear I've met that guy in Scotland who like stopped the car and asked me
with the vest.
to drive somewhere.
Right.
Not much has changed in some parts. Wonderfully. But yeah, I love the sounds, they're playing on the sounds, and when she's like, this city is so loud, and just that sense of like being strangled and being used to a kind of quiet, and maybe that's why the violence is so big and bright and bold and horrible, because that's the loudest thing that happens. You know, it's clashing of swords and screaming of people and irons and things like that. So it's a big deal.
So, well, I'm hooked. I haven't quite finished the first season, but I did watch episode 1 of season 2. So I'm going to go back, try to lure my husband in, and watch the rest of it.
I'm liking the French. It's interesting. I was thinking today, because I noticed that they dub the French. They don't dub the Gaelic. And I think
that's because...
Right.
Because she speaks French and she doesn't...
French. Yes, and that's kind of what I figured. But I want the translation in Gaelic. I want to hear what they're saying. Although the conversation that Myrta and Jamie have when he's healing was amazing, to watch the acting and have no idea what they're saying, but totally understand everything that they're talking about, at least on a very emotional level. I love Myrta. I think he's fantastic. Some cool characters, for sure.
And what did you think about the changes that they made to the opening theme?
I love that. They've been doing that subtly through the whole season, too.
I guess they did it between... Do they do it every episode? They don't do it every episode, right?
No.
It was like, I think it was season, because mine is split up season 101, season 102, and then 201. So, yeah, I'll have to go back and... Well, yeah, because you get like little puzzle pieces, like when she comes across Galus in the woods, and it's like, oh, that's from the opening. Okay, and
I love the opening credits. I think that it's a beautiful version of the song.
They changed it up this time. They removed the bagpipes. They added violins. They put in a verse in French.
Oh, because
I love the verse in French. I thought that was really cool. I'm always fascinated to see my people. I love that it was like a fish market in the background. It was really funny. But I'm impressed with the CG too. I mean, it's subtle, but to get the feeling of a French port city, they couldn't just it's not like Castle Leoch where they can just kind of like I guess they built a lot of. They were even in Lallybroch. They built the entire interior sets were all built in studio.
Oh,
the
wow.
external shots were all a real castle, but they couldn't actually film inside the castle. So um, I'm not sure how much what they're doing. It's hard to. There wasn't a lot to see in the first episode, but it'll be interesting if they, go to some of the French palaces and what they're gonna have this look like. So I'm intrigued.
So, with the first episode, were you at all exasperated with her when she ran after,
Yeah.
like I thought, okay, I get smart, imperious, empowered, but come on, you're pregnant, and like, what are you doing running after a sick guy? Like,
Yeah.
I get it, you're a healer, but enough with the I'm going to do what the headstrong.
I'm immune to smallpox.
Right. I'm glad you're so confident about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not familiar with statistics of exactly how immune you might be.
Yes. Yeah, I thought that was a little, but I guess they had to do something to establish some kind of tension. So I'm guessing they're drawing out this last bit of, because this is still from book one.
No,
Oh,
it's
is
book
it?
two.
Is it book two?
It is book two, yeah.
Oh, they go back and like build
Yeah,
up.
no, it's book two, and that's in the book. That's the first thing that she does is pisses off the rival of Jamie's cousin by having his ship destroyed because there's smallpox on board.
Ah,
This was the first time in this episode where I got exasperated with her, and I was just like, can you just for once, I love empowered women, just be quiet. Just let his sister talk, let him, just like get the lay of the land, because you are not in your home place. Figure things out before you start telling people what to do. I was a little bit.
I almost wonder though if it's just like it's her comfort place because she's been so strong leading up until this episode. She's been the one that's kept everything together. Maybe this is just her, like, I've got to help somebody. I mean, she had to, do so much leading up to that, but maybe it was her attempt to make something make sense, or maybe she thought she could actually help him.
Well, and that could be legitimate. Like, the strategy has worked so far. I've, done all these great things, so I'll keep on doing this. But I was, like I said, for the first time, frustrated with her this episode.
Yeah.
Not deal breaker, not horrible. Just, part of it is, I guess, you've got to express kind of the. I wouldn't even call it a negative. But like I was yelling at the TV a little bit.
Yeah, and I will say I'm missing Jamie's tousled mop. He looks nice with it brushed back. That's fine, but there's something very and I think that it brings out the age difference in them. Like for some reason, I thought their age difference was a lot more pronounced than it actually was in the books.
I was going to say, is it 5 years? What's
5 years. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like 5 years. I thought for some reason it was like 10 years for some reason. I have no idea why. Probably because when I read it, I felt like 5 years was 10 years. no,
Probably because I was 32.
Well, I was more like 23. But yeah, I was thinking that, and it seemed like when they were like, she's 27. I was like, ooh, wow, she's old. But it felt like, I guess, 27 to 22, which I think is what it was.
Yeah.
And I think in the book she talks a lot more about that. She's very self-conscious that she's clearly being wedded to this young man, because like Leary's like 15 and she wants to be with him. So no matter how you cut it, that's a 12-year difference between his other suitor and her.
Is that how old how do you know that?
I think they say it at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, she's not, like, maybe not even 15. She's really, and that's why he's like, you must have been like 7 when I was here last time, and I was 16. So yeah, she got a little annoying, but whatever. She got hers, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know.
I was worried about poor Ned. Like like I said, I haven't seen everything, so the last thing that I saw was him defending.
Yes.
At the trial.
Yeah, I don't know I don't remember, and I don't think that's resolved. There's a lot that's unresolved after season 1. Just you don't really know where people end up. So, but what are we hoping to see? What are you hoping from as a non-book reader? What are you hoping to see more of? I was surprised there was absolutely no touchy-feely, sexy.
Oh, well, my understanding is that there's not going to be as much of that because he is traumatized.
Yeah.
So now they have to explore their relationship without the salve of marital intercourse as a social lubricant or whatever.
They do a good job. They are very talented at that part of their relationship, I will point out.
I gotta say that, yeah, they do. A lot of times, like, you watch stuff on TV and you go, she is totally like thinking about what she's making for dinner tonight. Like, it doesn't, even though it's a sex scene, it's so unrealistic. That stuff looked real.
I know. I was even wondering. I'm like, where's the merkin and where's the sock? It is like seamless. I mean, maybe they're going back and like brushing stuff off with some Photoshop, but it's just impressive, and it feels far more. I mean, especially even compared to some of the stuff we've seen on Game of Thrones and things in the genre that just don't feel. It's actually nice to see people who are passionately in love with each other, and there was no ulterior motives. This wasn't like revenge sex, and it wasn't. It was just
Right.
and the first time it took like 3 seconds, and then they tried again, and it got better, and they've been like improving as they're going along, and I just think that's really you just don't see that in any kind of TV. Sex is this thing that's just great out of the box.
Right. Well,
Right.
and he's a very sharing partner.
Mm-hmm.
He's very generous, which doesn't always get portrayed on more and more, but not always getting portrayed on television. So,
Well, yeah, that is actually that's worth mentioning. Is a woman's pleasure is seldom thought about on
Yeah.
TV and by both husbands.
right.
She knows what she wants and she asks for it.
Yes. And she has a table for it and everything.
A curiously sturdy table in an abandoned castle.
As a medievalist, I was like, there's no way there'd be a table still left in that. and it would never hold. I mean, she's not they call her sturdy, but she ain't no sturdy lady. She's like an model. She's a beautiful woman, but not, she would not, yeah. It was interesting. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. What about you, Marzia? Anything that you're hoping to see this season?
Well, I think that I don't know. I'm hoping to be surprised because I was pleasantly surprised first season, so I'm hoping that I'll be surprised again this season and that they'll make intelligent choices.
Yeah, and I feel like they've done that a lot. And there's, as I think Jackie was saying, who did not make the chat tonight, but she was saying how much she appreciates the sort of glossing over of the pages and pages of genealogy.
Oh my God, yeah.
Wonderfully well researched. Worked great when Jamie's talking about how proud he is of the people that he came from versus the litany that you have to read. Unless you're like me, like I was saying earlier, ask me about my genealogy, I will happily talk to you for 3 straight hours about things you don't care about. Even in fiction, just not super exciting. But yeah, I feel like that they've established a kind of a trust with the audience at this point. I haven't talked to many people who've also read the books, but I feel like in a different way than many of the other made for TV versions of books that I've seen, I feel like they get the core of what the story is. And if things like I didn't even realize that they had changed her maiden name, for instance. It's Beecham in the books, it's Beauchamp it's Beauchamp in the books, it's Beecham in the TV series.
Actually, it's the same last name.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's the English pronunciation of Beauchamp.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That's even though they spell
Makes sense.
Huh.
Which is why they asked if she's French, because her name is Claire Beecham. And
that's so terrible. I'm offended. Oh, it's the problem of being part Francophone. Okay, well, that's funny. Because I had read a wiki and they had spelled it differently, so they must have just had the same thought that I did.
No, well, because I was surprised when I saw it somewhere else that it was a pronunciation issue.
Wow. That's so far off. It makes people in the South look like they're being respectful. That's pretty special.
But
Well, now,
I would say, piggybacking on what Marzia said, and what you said about building up such incredible trust, and I would like to see, right. So my dream is to see more of, to be continually surprised and taken, the next step in this. We the things we just listed, the great characters, the full rounded emotional context that the story is given, the emphasis, the focus on female pleasure, like those are all great. Like I want more. Like
yeah.
I want the next step. I want it to be like a staircase. So like you said, surprise me. Like I thought that's all that I wanted. So
Yeah. And without being spoiler, I think there is real opportunity for that to happen, potentially in ways that we have not been shown on this size stage with this attention to detail, and clearly they've got a good budget, or they just like know how to shoot stuff like crazy good, because there's yet, I mean, it's the detail we were talking about, like the scarves and the fabric. By the second episode, I was like just drooling over the costumes, because the
yes.
shots with the light behind and the fibers of the wool, and this, you really being completely immersed in this other world, which, it's wish fulfillment fantasy to some extent. Oh, if I could go back 200 years and marry a Highlander. But there's so much more difficulty that comes from that it's really interesting to explore. So plenty of source material, that's for sure. But hey, unlike some other famous folks that write stories that get turned into shows that we like, much more of a, I guess the series is still going on, but it's not like in medias res. So interesting.
So well, I guess come back next week.
Yeah.
See what we think.
Yeah, yeah.
Sunday, Monday. What day do we want to?
I guess it premieres Saturday, right?
Yeah.
You're right.
But it's at 9 o'clock and simultaneous on the Stars app. So I think ideally if we could do it on Sundays, we could do it on Sundays. That just didn't work out this week. But
Let's plan it offline, and we'll figure it out.
Just to let people know. Okay, good.
Well, it's great talking to you.
okay.